Hey there, I'm Becky, and welcome to Literary Escapes with me, Becky. Today I have the great pleasure of sharing with you an interview I had recently with author Noreen Nasim. So sit back and enjoy, and we're going to be headed to Uganda for this one. So let's jump right into the conversation. Enjoy the show. Well, I am so excited to talk to you today, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me on, and thank you for inviting me today to spend some time to speak to you. It's I love what you do on Instagram. I've seen your profile.
Oh, thank you.
You speak to some of the most wonderful authors out there. So I am.
There are so many. Yeah, there's so many, and I've tried to keep it where I only interview and bring on the book club women authors, because I don't know, I feel like they don't necessarily get as big of a voice sometimes. And so
Yeah.
I, even if my platform isn't huge, I would like to, there's just so many amazing women authors. And so I feel like I'm trying to do my little part. And
I think you're doing an amazing job. I think just there you've kind of wrapped up everything that your platform stands for. And, you shouldn't call it little. I think it's quite rather powerful, because you're picking up on so many voices out there that tend to be sort of marginalized as well. And it is mostly women, unfortunately. So
it is, yeah. It's
great what you're doing. And these are the kind of platforms that tend to grow full force. So you may be little now, but watch this space.
I love that. I have been looking through your stuff, and I'm absolutely fascinated by it, because it doesn't sound like you started out intending to be an author.
No, exactly. Not at all. If you told the young sort of 14-year-old Noreen at school that she's one day going to be an author, I think 14-year-old Noreen would have had a shock and said, she'd have stood back and gone, what? No, I think you're looking for somebody else in the class. Definitely not me. I remember my English teacher, as lovely as he was absolutely fabulous, but I remember he would sort of encourage me in other subjects. He'd say, Noreen, you have some fab stories here. However, maybe you want to focus on your art, or maybe you want to focus on geography. Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It didn't really start out that way for me. I never intended to pick. I think this path just picked me. I didn't pick writing. It just fell into place at the right time, and just enlightened and illuminated a certain path for me that I'm just still following, and very much love. I didn't realize I would fall in love with writing, because I'd accepted this label very early on at school that I wasn't a very good writer.
Isn't that interesting how labels have such a lasting effect in our lives?
They do. They're very powerful. They say that words don't have an effect, but words are very powerful.
Words are powerful. Yeah.
They are, especially early on. I think as an adult, you're able to sort of mold words, and you're able to sort of understand words differently and interpret them differently. But when you're young, you have a very set guideline and framework for how you interpret things. And it's very limited as well. So you'll only interpret them in a certain way. So those labels do tend to stick with you. And
a lot of the stories we tell ourselves now are based on stories that either words that somebody told us earlier, or things that happened to us early on in life. And we still tell those stories to ourselves and don't necessarily question whether they're true or not. And
true. That is true. Yes. Part of those stories do form a lot of our stories that we share now. You're right. But we learn by these stories. And I think that's the reason we share so much of them, because they're lasting examples of what we should and shouldn't do, how we should behave, shouldn't behave, how we interpret things going forward. I think that's our human nature. This is why we share.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And if you are willing to step on a different path and maybe change a story, that's when magic happens, it feels like.
Absolutely. And it's having the courage to step on that different path as well. And I think so many people are sat on the edge, whether it's starting a new job, a career, or perhaps starting a family, perhaps entering a new relationship, or whatever phase it is within their life. Many people are sort of sat on the edge and this way and that way, but they won't quite make a decision. And sometimes it's about having the courage just to go for it and having no regret.
And being willing to fail, maybe.
Absolutely.
Maybe not.
But failures are such a great thing. I keep saying this to my students every single day. Do not be afraid of failures, because failures are part of our journey. And I think students are often sort of conditioned to think that failure is terrible. It's ride or die situation. If you fail, then that's it. It's the end of the road. And it's not,
It's not. It's like the beginning of the road.
It is. Yeah, it's part of it. It's part of the journey. And I think it's what strengthens the road, and it strengthens your path. So
exactly.
You need to fail over and over again in order to become better. And I think this is what I'm constantly trying to normalize, whether it's amongst students, whether it's amongst staff in meetings, whether it's amongst, sort of family members. I'm constantly saying, don't worry, you fall down, you get back up, you try again.
Exactly.
But you keep your lessons in tow, but remember, what you've learned from it and go forward. But yeah.
I was thinking about that this morning for whatever reason, that it's so interesting how it feels like the youth of today are protected from failing. And I mean, when I was a kid, nobody's told me not to. I remember very clearly riding on my horse through an orange grove and got clocked in the head going under a branch. And I can tell you that was a good lesson. I learned not to do that.
It's so true. This is it. But I think you're right. The youth going forward now, we do wrap them in cotton wool. And I think it's easily done. I think, sort of earlier on, before I became a mother, I think I was very, very strict with my students. And, as soon as I became a mother, I realized there was a certain soft side of me that came to the surface.
And you want to protect your kids. I mean,
absolutely. And I started seeing the students differently. And I thought, oh my goodness. And I began wrapping them. And I thought, no, I can't do this. This isn't the right way forward. But yeah, we do. I think it's human instinct to want to protect our children, our teens, our youngsters. But
yeah,
I think they have to be allowed to make their own mistakes. You've got to give them room. You've got to give them space. The best thing you can do is advise them, but you cannot hold them tight in a blanket, because at the end of the day, we've learned from our mistakes, and that's pretty much what makes us strong.
Exactly.
And we
don't made us who we are. Yeah.
Absolutely. We can't deny them the opportunity to become strong themselves, because essentially, one day we won't be there to guide them. So you've got to try and give them every bit of advice you can. And sometimes I wonder whether it's just a cycle, because I remember things my mother said to me when I was young, and it went in one ear and out the other. And I was like, yeah, Mom, whatever. And we never learn from other people's mistakes. No matter how much we try, we will never learn from other people's mistakes.
Isn't that the truth? Oh,
it is. The most intelligent creatures on this earth, the most intelligent people that are in the forefront, helping humanity today on this planet, they will have never learned from other people's mistakes, because we don't do that. It's not within our nature. And it's frustrating as an adult, knowing that you can't pass that wisdom on. It is hard. But what you can do is you can make people aware. Again, it comes back to sharing stories, sharing experiences.
Exactly.
And create a sense of awareness, but we will essentially make our own mistakes, And
our kids will, and our students will, and yeah.
You have to, because that is how we learn. That is how we learn.
That's right. So that was a fun diversion there.
Yes.
So how did you become a writer?
It was, I tell you, Becky, it was a little flame inside. It was this burning desire, a flame that got stronger and stronger and stronger to tell my father's story. And it was incredible, because I was in the very early stages of motherhood. I had a young sort of 8-month-old baby at the time. She's now 4 years old. And I remember watching a program about the Asian expulsion on TV, and it covered the whole story of Idi Amin in 1972 when he expelled over 80,000 Asians within the framework of 90 days. And I've always known that Dad was an expat, and I never really looked into the sort of the historical archives or the stats or the details or the programs. I thought, well, here's an opportunity. Let me watch this and let's go back in time. And that program just hit me like a breeze block. I was stunned that night because I just thought, oh my gosh, why have I never looked into this? You know, I've always sort of known about it. It's been there in the background, but why have I never delved into this? This is such a huge historical event that took place, and there's just not enough coverage. And I thought to myself, well, I know what happened, but I don't really know much about what Dad went through, his perspective, how it made him feel, what he experienced. So I rang him the next morning, and I remember being in tears that night. Sort of, I didn't sleep very well. And the next morning I rang and I said, Dad, you know, you've always spoken about the expulsion, but how did it make you feel knowing that you had 90 days to leave your home, you know, with absolutely nothing, just meager belongings?
Yeah.
And he sort of froze and said, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
You've known about this for over 30 years. Why are you asking me now? And I said, Dad, I just watched this program last night and I just couldn't sleep. And again, I broke down in tears, and my dad was like, don't worry, don't cry. It's fine. You know, I'll tell you everything you need to know. Come and see me. So I went to see him.
Okay.
And we sat down, and what started as a poem evolved into a short story. And from there, it just evolved into a full-blown novel. Wow. And every single day, I was still on maternity, I would go there every day and I would just take little snippets of his sort of
different pieces
words,
of it. Yeah.
Pieces, that's it. And I had to be very mindful of PTS as well, because obviously it's, you know, my auntie describes it as a Pandora's box. It had been locked up for so many years. There was a lot coming out. So it was done in stages, really. It was done in little pieces. And then I remember sort of sitting down, and at times it would get a little bit heavy, and I would sort of stop and say, right, Dad, that's enough for today. You know, here's your grandchild.
Yeah.
Let's have some fun now.
Good buffer.
Good buffer, exactly. So it was a lovely process. I spent a lot of my maternity with Dad and my little one together, and you know, it was
what a
lovely.
special time.
Very special, and it was very emotional as well. I had a lot of hormones as well flying around, fresh hormones. You know, it was a very special time. It was lovely to sit with Dad and extract that. And then eventually, as I was writing, I realized there was something about writing that I just loved. It was a bubble that I would escape into, and
isn't that funny? It's
so strange. And I thought, wow, I feel like me in this bubble. It was like I'd found a little piece of me, you know, and I think that's what life is about. It's about finding these little pieces of the puzzle that fit with you and resonate with you. And all of a sudden I felt this real sense of deep happiness, thinking, wow, I don't want to ever stop doing this. This is something
that is amazing. I love that. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that was pretty much it. So it was a piece that I'd unlocked, a bit like, you know, when you play a game and you've unlocked this level and you get this rush of coins.
Power up.
Power up level. That was the process. That was pretty much how I
love that. That's really cool. So was your dad single when he got expelled?
He was only 19 years old, and he was single. He was very young. Obviously, at 19, he was just, you know, so just starting out, you know.
And did he have the British passport? Is that?
So how it worked was back in the days. How it worked was when a lot of Indian people sort of came over from India. I mean, the majority came from India. However, there were other countries where people had migrated to Uganda, sort of from Pakistan, Oman. So there were nearby countries where many people had come, but the majority had come over from India. And it was when the British were, you know, sort of colonizing India, they were ruling there, and they sort of said, look, we want to build railways in Africa. We need a workforce. We'd love to bring you over. In return, we will offer you citizenship. So what essentially happened was Sort of in the 50s and the 60s, a lot of workers sort of came over, they built the railways, but once built, they chose to stay there rather than moving to the UK. They thought, this is brilliant. The climate is the same, food, etc. You know, they were quite happy there. So they settled, and that was it. They made a life there for themselves. They built up businesses, you know, sort of contributed to the economy. And they were happy, and there was sort of, I'd say, at least 2 to 3 generations of people that had settled there, and they were just living life rather sort of, you know, cohesively as well. They lived well amongst each other. You know, you had people from different religions, backgrounds, races, living in harmony, which was so idyllic. And I think that's something that Dad very much misses even now. You know,
I would imagine, yeah.
There was a very sort of, you know, homely feeling about that place that I think everybody misses.
So Uganda was a British colony as well, is that?
It was.
That's why the
that's what happened. So then when they gained independence in 1962, they then had President Milton Obote, who sort of looked after the country for many years until he was then overthrown by his own general, who was Idi Amin at the time. Right. So Milton Obote, I believe, was on I think he was on a UN tour abroad in Malaysia, I think a Far Eastern country. And it was literally as he left, Idi Amin found his opportunity, overthrew, did a military coup and took over.
Wow.
And the first year of his reign, I think things were fairly stable, but then he started to gain momentum in terms of creating his own stamp on the country. And it was pretty much overnight that he decided he doesn't want Asian people to be in this country. He realized that most of the economy was kind of being run by Asians. And he thought, no, you know, and in one of his speeches, I think he even sort of says, I've seen a little snippet on YouTube, how he was very adamant that he wanted Ugandan people to be actually running the administration. And he sort of declared that UK had caused this problem by bringing the Indians into the country. And he then sort of, you know, this is your problem. You need to solve it. Come and take them away. You've got 90 days. Otherwise, they will be. Absolutely. Otherwise, they were due to be executed. He was very well known for massacring tribes, many of the followers of his predecessor. And he would feed them to the crocodiles in the Nile, you know, and
oh my goodness,
scary, yeah, like Victoria even. But yeah,
wow.
He was a very scary man, and I sort of discovered more as I did my research about who Idi Amin was and watched, you know, The Last King of Scotland. I realised how incredibly terrifying this soul was. You know, he was a force to be reckoned with. He was very much feared by many of the other world leaders at the time.
Yeah.
So when he declared that this is it, you've got 90 days, you know, at first people were very apprehensive. My father's family was sort of thinking, is this real? You know, he tends to make lots of claims and sometimes he doesn't quite follow through. What's he going to do? And then as things became unstable, suddenly the communities realized, my goodness, we
need to get out of here.
We've got to go, you know, because there's trouble brewing, people getting killed in the streets, there's land and properties being pillaged, looted, businesses being looted. And it all began within that 90-day period, not after.
Okay.
So people realized and thought, my goodness, you know, we've got to make a move. We've got to keep, you know, take this seriously. And everybody but my father, unfortunately, had their passports sorted. My father had never actually travelled out of the country. So in order to get his paperwork done, unfortunately, he was left behind with his uncle because my grandfather's main concern was getting the women out of the country. Yeah. His first, you know, priority was looking after his wife and his daughter. The women, he just had to get them to safety. So my dad stayed behind with his uncle. He did cut it very close. I think he managed to get out within 3 days of the deadline, the looming deadline.
My goodness.
Yeah, quite scary, but you know, in the end, yeah, very frightening. But the book itself, Expelled from Uganda, kind of covers a lot of his trials and tribulations that he had, the challenges that he had, just getting to the airport, just getting his paperwork, just getting those sort of little milestones that he needed just to, you know, the plane itself. It covers all of those stories, and then it zigzags between present day timeline, and then it goes back in time as well to little short stories of when he was young, days where he celebrated just, being a child, living in Africa, enjoying, the fruits of the land, having a very normal family life like any other child, growing up with siblings and quarrels with parents and naughty things that he did, and, little, he was a hooligan. He definitely was a hooligan.
That's funny.
Yeah, so all of these funny stories that just show that they were a normal family like anybody else, and then all of a sudden they just had this huge
turned upside down.
Life just went upside down for them. It really did.
Wow. And was he married at that? Well, he was 19. So was he married or?
No, he wasn't. Dad got married in, I think it was sort of, I'd say about 3 or 4 years after arriving in the UK. So he was about 20, about 23, I think, when he got married.
Okay.
So, yeah, and he met my mum in the UK. Yeah.
And so have you ever been to Uganda?
No, so I'm hoping to travel back with Dad for the very first time in 50 years.
Wow.
I'd love to go back this year because I would actually love for Dad to just see it one more time. He's not been back since, and this year marks the 50th anniversary. So we've got celebrations happening this year and a lot of reunions happening. We've got events happening down in London, which I'm going to be hopefully attending. And yeah, everybody's getting together. It's been 50 years, half a century's gone by. And in the past, when I've asked Dad, would you like to go back? His answer was no, I don't want to see it because it won't be the Uganda that I left behind.
True.
So, I can see it from that perspective. But I've asked him again this year, I sort of said, Dad, would you consider it? And he sort of showed interest and he said, yeah, I think I might consider it. Okay. So I think he's warming to the idea.
Wow, how interesting. It's got to be, like you said earlier, the Pandora's box.
I think every time I speak to not only Dad, I've got, sort of aunts and family members. And when I've spoken to them about this, there's always this pause, this really long pause. And it's sort of, you can almost sort of see that there's like a film playing in the background, in their minds, that their eyes just glaze over and you can just see that there's this rush of memories that just goes through them.
Yeah.
I wish I could just, crawl into one of those minds and actually see it for myself, because that was the hardest part about writing this book. I could only interpret or envisage what Dad would verbally tell me.
Willing to tell you. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that interpretation of the book has come from my interpretation of what Dad went through.
Yeah.
Again, I would love to just see it, if there was some sort of video footage, that would cover it, that would really give me an insight. And I think that's going back to the day that it hit me, watching that documentary. I think that's why it hit me so hard, because I saw black and white footage, I saw actual footage, and I saw expressions, I saw fear, I saw uncertainty, and it just, I think that's what evoked that feeling within, that urge to write.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And you started as a visual artist, correct?
I did, yes. So I've always been, and still am a visual artist. I've loved the idea of graphic design, and I just love the idea of IT and art coming together. It's a lovely fusion, and I love digital art. I love working with sort of branding and poster design, book covers. I designed my own book cover. Nice. And these sort of things are really, sort of part of my vascular system, really. Artists. So, I never in a million years thought I would take to writing. I've written so many academic papers, but the world of literature is just such a different beast. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I've got to pour my heart and soul into this and really sort of learn the tools of the trade, equip myself. And I just took to online tutorials. I took online courses, masterclasses, and I joined groups, local writing groups at the library. I sort of befriended lots of authors for advice. I have a good colleague of mine who's an author. And, all of this network around me was fabulous, because it was that support system that allowed me to then build on the confidence and go forward. And that was it. I just took the leap, and that was it. Every day was a learning day. Every day was a day in class, because
Yeah.
I'm constantly learning, and I still am. Now I don't really have my father to call and say, Dad, what happens next? I'm writing my next fiction novel. So I've jumped from memoir to fiction.
Okay, that was going to be a question, is, are you still writing?
I am, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
exciting.
I am still writing. I'm so excited. I'm 20% into my next novel. I've now jumped from sort of, the world of nonfiction to fiction. I'm now writing a fictional tale about the Ottoman Empire and about the harems and the women of the harems as well. There's a lot of marginalized stories there that I want to sort of bring to the surface. And it's really interesting because, again, it's like the extra wheels have come off the bike and I'm learning on a two-wheeler now. I don't have the support system. I can't ring anybody and say, what happens next? What's the next chapter? I have to create this world myself.
Yeah.
So it's scary. I'm still learning.
It is scary. Yeah. I'm in the midst of writing my first book right now as well. And
amazing.
I totally relate to that. It's weird that this whole story can come out of your head.
It's amazing, isn't it? This is it. It just shows you the power of the human brain and how we create realms and worlds and connections, relationships, how we sculpt characters. It all comes from within here, right? And it is amazing. I think every writer must accept. I don't think there's ever a writer in the world who's sort of written a bunch of books and then sat down for their next book and said, I know exactly what I'm doing.
I agree with you.
I don't think they exist.
I totally agree.
Out there, show me who they are, because I don't think they exist.
I've talked to so many authors in the past year and a half, and even ones who've written like 40 books, they still say that same thing where, you sit down and you think, why do I feel like I'm qualified to do this? And how am I ever going to get this out of my head?
Absolutely. So
like, that's not encouraging.
But it's the reality. It just shows that, even the most, well-established authors out there that write books upon books, they experience that. They go through these emotions and feelings. They experience imposter syndrome with every single book.
Exactly.
And it's normal. It's a normal feeling to experience that.
And like we were talking about earlier about failing and learning to live within the fear, I guess.
Yeah. I have so many questions that keep, bombarding my mind. I sort of think to myself, well, is my next book going to be as good? What if it's an absolute flop? What if people have a certain expectation now? And what if,
right?
There's so many what ifs, but the thing is, you can't stop the what ifs, but what you can do is when they do come in, you can learn to get rid of them. You can learn to sort of harbor your own intentions and remember and remind yourself what your intentions are. Why are you writing? Yeah. If you can keep asking yourself that, why are you writing? And if you can answer that with full confidence every single time, it will remind you the reason behind why you're doing this. And, just the fact that you love writing is a good enough reason. So goodbye imposter syndrome.
Exactly. And whether anybody buys a book or not, that doesn't make you any less of a writer. I mean,
it doesn't matter. You are writing for you. It's for your stories. It's, it's to share your version of events. And, whether it's a large market that buys in or a tiny niche market, even if one person reads it and that person is you, then you know what? That is enough, because
exactly,
it's damn well good enough.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I saw that you did a TEDx talk. How did that come about?
Oh, so that was, oh my goodness, that was incredible and also incredibly frightening, because a lot of people say to me, Noreen, you come across so confident and you're full of beans and energy, and it must have been so wonderful. And it really truly was. The experience of TEDx was great. But that's not to say that my goodness, I had sweaty palms throughout the process. My palms sweated.
You faked it well.
I tell you, it was hard. It was one of the most exhilarating life experiences that I've ever had. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Would I do it again? Maybe in a few years when I've gathered a bit of energy. I'm still recovering from the hardships, because it was hard work. My goodness, it does take a lot out of you, but the amount of growth I think that you go through with such an experience is immense. And how it came about was, obviously at the time I'd released the books, there was a lot happening in the newspapers locally as well, radio shows and interviews. And I came across the TEDx platform and I thought, oh, this would be interesting. And then TEDx started following me, TEDx Doncaster on Twitter, and I thought, oh my goodness, they know who I am.
That's crazy.
So I literally just sort of went through the application. I saw that the applications were open and I thought, right, let me give this a go. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing it, but I'm just going to do it. And
I love that.
It was really frightening. And all of a sudden I got a response saying, we'd love for you to audition. And so I auditioned and I got chosen as one of the 12 speakers. And it was incredible. The people that I spoke with on stage to this day, I'm still friends with today. In fact,
that's awesome.
We've got a TEDx alumni wedding coming up just in a matter of 4 weeks. We've got TEDx bridesmaids as well. And
that is so cool.
It's absolutely incredible. So the experience was fab. Obviously, the theme was positive disruptor and how
I liked that
shapes our lives. So there were so many different speakers on the day. We had an ex-policeman, we had entrepreneurs, we had scientists, doctors. It was incredible. And we were all sort of looking at positive disruption and how it can play a positive part in our lives for the better. And my angle was from storytelling. It was the idea of, how positive disruption is so necessary at different stages of our lives, whether it's in our personal, our careers, whether it's, from a business angle, professional angle, whatever it is. Positive disruption is something, it's one of my life mantras now. It's become something that I do now every single day, because without it, we are stuck in integral cogs of systems that just keep rolling over and over again. And we will never change if we don't shake things up for the better.
True. Yeah.
And, I know there's this old phrase of, why break it, why try to fix it, if it's not broken.
Yeah, exactly.
But it may not look broken from the outside, but what if it is? What if we can do things better? We have to keep evolving.
We do.
Humans. So why not evolve our systems? We have to change the way we see things, the way we interact. These things have to evolve with us, because we can't become super, human and then just have the same old systems again and again around us.
Exactly.
Work. We have to shake things up. And sometimes that's what's needed. And yes, it can be a painful process, but think about the long-term outcomes.
Right.
So that's what my message was to the audiences. It was all about thinking about, not being afraid as well from starting from scratch, because it was the idea of Dad's, legacy as well. The idea that he came to the UK with absolutely nothing. And he started from scratch. And every time I've had a little knockback in life or a change of direction, a change of path or pace, Dad has always said, Noreen, never be afraid of change. Never be afraid from starting from scratch, because these are the things, that will help build stronger foundations going forward. And again, it comes to failure. Don't be afraid. You can build again. Just have the right intention. So that was what my talk was about. And it was amazing.
It was a really good talk. One of the lines that stuck out to me with it was, never let society make choices for you. And I love that line. I think that's so important too. Even if you're completely different from what everybody else is saying or thinking, own it. Just do what you think you're supposed to do. And
this is it. And I know people who, unfortunately, they're too afraid to sort of step out of that comfort zone and speak their mind, live life how they want to live it. And it's quite sad, because, sometimes it is that push that we need. It's that courage that we need to make our own decisions, to, sort of live life in your how should I put it, in harmony, I think, with your own heart, because
Exactly.
you cannot harmonize to other people's thoughts and processes. You can only harmonize to your own. If you are then just falling in line with what other people expect of you, then are you truly happy?
Well, and it's got to be exhausting on your body to not be living the way you're supposed to be living, not living in your truth and whatever
Absolutely,
that is. So,
absolutely. This is it. And I think it doesn't matter, what people think. It doesn't matter how hard, they sort of make you think you should be on a certain path. You've just got to stick to your own path.
Yeah.
Because the moment you do that, it's the most liberating feeling you will ever have, because you've taken control and you're sort of really just paving your own way, and you can own it, because that success will be purely yours. It won't be part of anybody else's input or influence. That is your success.
Yeah.
And you own it in the end, nobody else. Nobody
That's
can
right.
say, well, we take credit for this or we take credit for that. No, you take credit for it, because you did the hard work and you stood up for what you believed in.
Yep. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, so when is your next book? How far along? You're 20% along writing it? Is that
about 20-25%? So okay. It's very interesting. It's all about again, I've stuck to this zigzag kind of timeline because I loved how it worked.
I love that. Yeah,
I loved the plot. So that the plot sort of narrative and the way, the structure, I love the way it flips back and forth. So in my next book, I'm keeping that element. I've got a present day character, and I've also got an Ottoman character as well.
Wow,
so the Ottoman character, she's incredible. She's very much, quite the rebel. She's amazing, and she's a maid as well. So she's somebody who sort of works her way up, the system in the palace. So she sort of starts off in the kitchens and she slowly starts to work the ranks. Nice. She comes from a very poor background. She's somebody who has gone through quite a lot, really, to sort of get where she is. But along the way, she learns so much about palace life. She interacts with so many different characters from, the hierarchical system. So we have eunuchs, we have the Grand Vizier, we have the army officers, we have people that are working really hard to climb that ladder to get close to the Sultan. So she, along the way, she experiences a lot of, there's love, there's loss. There's a lot of treachery as well. There's secrets on the corridors. There's backstabbing. There's all sorts going on.
All kinds of good stuff.
All kinds of good stuff. But we also have a present day character who works in the V&A Museum in London. So she's a curator, she's a historian, and she's a curator of jewellery. And she's been asked to come to the Topkapi Palace to have a look at creating a new pavilion and designing the whole new sort of look for the treasury, which is pretty much the Sultan's treasury. And it's all about the Spoonmaker's diamond. So the Spoonmaker's diamond actually exists. It's an 86-carat diamond that's currently in the Topkapi Palace, but nobody actually knows how it got there. Nobody has. There is one common story, which is that it was found in a fisherman's net. The fisherman then thought it was a piece of glass. A spoonmaker offered him 3 spoons in return and said, I think it's a piece of glass, but I'll give you 3 spoons. He then handed it over. The spoonmaker realized this is actually a real diamond. He then gave it to the Grand Vizier, and from there it ended up in the hands of the Sultan. So the story that I'm trying to cover is the part before it ends up in the fisherman's net. What happened to that diamond? How did it end up there? And what have these 2 characters got to do with it, our present day and our past character?
How fascinating. That's fun.
Yeah, so
I look forward to seeing how it all comes together, because that's a lot of stuff going on. That'll be fun.
I'm currently immersed in Ottoman research, and I just went out there sort of in February. I went to the palace again for
nice.
sort of the time. I love going there. It's so wonderful. But I went with a fresh set of eyes this time, went into the palace, took lots of photographs, scouted out where the living quarters were and where all the characters would be set. And it was so lovely to be there in person. So I managed to get everything that I needed. Nice. And the story's underway. So yeah.
Well, good. Well, good luck. I can't wait to hear more about that one when it goes further along.
Hopefully next year. Hopefully 2023.
Well, we will look forward to that. So if people want to find your book, where can they find that? It's called Expelled from Uganda.
Absolutely. So Expelled from Uganda, so they can search for me on Amazon. It is available on there as Kindle and paperback. And yeah, you can just find me on there pretty much. I'm an Amazon girl. I think Amazon's also the way forward. It's absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely. And how can people follow you?
So people can follow me either, there's my website, which is noreennasim.com. I've got all my details on there. I'm on Instagram, and my handle is @mysuitcasenotebook. And I'm regularly on Instagram, getting up to all sorts of shenanigans and all
I enjoy your Instagram. It's a lot of fun.
I do keep it real. I share all sorts there, and from all walks of life. And yeah, just keep in touch. I'll be posting lots of Instagram stories on my sort of progress on my next book.
Nice.
And I'll just keep you all updated on there. So yes, you can find me there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the conversation today. I enjoyed this so much.
Thank you so much for having me on, and please do keep in touch.
I absolutely will.
Thanks for joining me today on the Literary Escape podcast. If you enjoy hearing the behind the book story, then join me in the Literary Escape Society. We're a community of travelers who love books, or maybe book lovers who love to travel. Either way, if you need an escape, a literary escape, come join us as we read our way around the world together, one book at a time. Check out the show notes to learn more about the Literary Escape Society. And we'll see you next time on the next episode.